A very warm welcome to everyone tuning in today. Welcome to episode 108 of Navigating Now. I am Aishani Gupta, a senior consultant here at Thoughtium and your host for the Navigating Now today. We are hosting our perspective series for the month of October, and we are on part two of our perspective series today. For those of you tuning in for the first time, our perspective series is a three-part series comprising of first three great conversations on what this month's theme is, which is on building innovation capabilities within your teams, followed by an article that helps you get closer to the Thoughtium perspective and these conversations, and rounded out by a toolkit that you can take to your teams and bring it to life. We go live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central, come rain or shine. You can find all our episodes on thoughtium.com/live. We are stoked for our second conversation today, and I am extremely happy to welcome our second guest, Grift Grenbrink, our very own Vice President at Thoughtium, a leader I respect immensely, someone who works with the top L&D leaders, helping build scalable learning cultures. And today we will discuss what it means to build and scale an innovation culture. Welcome, Grift.
Well, very, very nice introduction, Ashani, and extremely excited for our conversation and excited to bring a little bit of the goodness that we talk about on a day-to-day basis around innovation to hopefully the masses here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Delighted to have you here, Grift. And let me start by saying, how are you doing? And how is my old home Boston treating you?
Well, Boston's great. It's a little bit of a weather shock going from 90 degrees in Southern California to jumping off a plane and it's 43. So having your temperature experience does a little bit to the body system, but it's great to be in a new environment. Like it does re-energize you when you step into a new arena. Boston's just a nice bustling downtown area, and so I would say I was a little tired from the plane, but I'm feeling re-energized and glad to be here and glad to be in this conversation. So,
well, delighted, and again, excited to have you here and to unpack what does innovation mean, and what can leaders do in terms of encouraging and identifying mindsets and behaviors, and using tools that can actually help bring each person within their team to the innovation table. Let's begin with a little bit of an existential question that most people: how do you define creativity? How do you
well,
define creativity?
well, those that know me know I love to go into the theoretical, the
Yes.
philosophical. So, but don't mind spending a little time here. Creativity. I think it's one of those words that it gets introduced to you really, really early on in your life. Um, but as I've started to unpack it a bit more through my own journey, I think creativity, when it boils down to it, is actually related more so to confidence than anything else. I think if you think about when you're younger, particularly when you're a child, um, the amount of confidence you have around your creativity is almost limitless. And I think as you go through years and years and experiences and certain things start to, click, or maybe you do certain things and you get your hand swatted, or maybe you do certain things and you get rewarded, your ability to be more open stance and be confident in that open stance, I think gets a little limited. And so I think a lot of times what it takes when you get older, when you get more seasoned, maybe even when you've been more tenured in a particular role or part of an organization, is that how do you get back, or how do you regain that confidence to step into the creative space and really be a bit more out of your comfort zone, out of your natural biases, out of the assumption. So I maybe would counterintuitively say creativity more than anything else takes confidence.
I love that response, and I'll tell you why. I've asked this question so many times. I've never had someone say confidence to me. And when you contextualize that, and I'm like, that is brilliant, because that is true. As we grow older, we have these own, self-imposed constraints and restrictions that actually limits our creativity in a lot of ways. That has to be my new favorite answer to what is creativity.
All right, so I'm starting off on a good spot here. So
Great,
we're starting
great
from
spot. Yeah.
positive.
And how do creativity and innovation relate? How do you define innovation, and how does it differ, or how do they complement each other?
Mm. It's interesting. I think creativity and innovation probably suffer from a lot of the same societal ailments. And I know that's a really
Hmm.
large, loaded term, but I think both terms are probably used interchangeably. They're probably used in many different ways, but I think we have in some ways we have our own personal interpretation of what they mean. Almost kind of where we started this conversation. And I think at times we tend to think of these words in large paintbrush activities, right? Innovation is
Mm,
a brand new technology. Innovation is a brand new way of looking at something or doing things. Creativity is the same way. We're always looking potentially at artists who have rewritten a particular form of painting, or people who are doing something very different from how it's normally been done. I think that sort of it undermines what creativity and innovation can be, and I think it undermines our own ability to step in innovation where it makes sense for us. Because the reality is, all of us as individuals think differently, have different experiences, have different mindsets, have different communication styles. All of that rolls up into saying innovation can be something as large as defining a brand new category in a space. It could also be on a day-to-day basis, just doing something 2% better. And I think at
absolutely.
times we focus a bit more on that big splash style of innovation or creativity, and we don't do a lot of justice to the everyday improvement around innovation or creativity, which is where a lot of the magic can come from, and where a lot more inclusivity can be brought into the space. So for me, it's I know not necessarily answering your question at the top value, but I think the intersection for me is actually looking at where these two terms might be underutilized.
I actually love that perspective as well. And I think, Griff, the last time Anthony and I were speaking, we also kind of spoke about the strength and the importance of diversity. And when we speak about diversity, it's exactly what you said, diversity in your personal preferences, in opinions, in perspectives. And both creativity and innovation actually kind of feed off that diversity. And they actually gain strength from that diversity. So, like you said, in your day to day, if you're able to do a better job of bringing these different perspectives and different opinions and preferences of working in, that incremental innovation has a lot of strength as well. It doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be radical. Um,
Yeah. And Ashani, just
yeah.
to build on that a little bit, someone said this to me once, and it really resonated. Particularly looking at the lens of diversity of thinking and diversity of
Hmm.
experience, and always looking at the teams that are around us and individuals who we work with as 4D human beings. And it's really easy in time to see this person standing in front of me and who they are. But a lot of
Yeah.
times we don't think about that fourth dimension of the time, the experience, all the things that have led that person to this particular moment that can be utilized in such amazing ways in whatever problem we're trying to solve. So 4D human being is something that I've kind of taken and run with, and made my own through my own career.
I think I'm going to be more intentional about seeing the fourth dimension with people as well, which also kind of brings me to the next question. Peter Drucker said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," the very famous quote. What do you think culture is to innovation?
Oh, I'm a big Peter Drucker fan. I love the quote. I've used the quote on many a slide for the consultants out there. Um, I think culture and innovation. You can't have an innovative culture without recognizing another famous quote around culture is that it's thought about strategically or globally, but it's actually
Hmm.
produced locally. And I think innovation is the same way. If we're just focused on the next big thing for our organization or for our function or for our team, we miss out on the aspect that innovation really is rooted in mindset. Same with culture.
Yeah.
Culture is rooted in mindset. And do people really feel like they have agency or ownership or of particular parts of roles or projects or initiatives that allows them to be creative, that allows them to be innovative? And you can come back and say, hey, we're an organization that does and changes the world. But if you don't give the space to people every day to try to be an innovative in their own particular way, you'll never have a culture truly built on innovation.
I love that. And I want to ask you almost like, what does having agency over your work look like? But I want to kind of ask it the other way around. What does the lack of agency look like?
Uh, it's interesting. It kind of brings us back to where we just started the conversation 10 minutes ago. Lack of
Yeah.
agency to me shows up in lack of confidence. And so if you are starting to show, you're asking people to think about things differently or to try new approaches, or what do you think about this? And you start to see a lot of hesitation. You start to see a lot of deference. You start to see a lot of unsure looks. You're not creating a sense of ownership for people to be able to sit in uncertainty and feel like they can be confident. And I think that is, if there's anything that I try to build with our team, um, is the reality that I don't have all the answers. I never claim to ever have all the answers, but I want our team to feel like they're confident to be able to deal with uncertainty and ambiguity. And I think a lot of that is how you approach every day. It can't just be asking people to join brainstorming sessions. It's how you show up for them as a leader, and it's how you let them show up for themselves. So I think for me, it kind of goes back to the idea of confidence.
I love that. And what I'm hearing is that some of the lack of agency, or the fact someone has agency and interest and confidence in their work, kind of shines through their attitude, through their reactions, through how they're feeling emotionally in the moment with their job. Like you asked me the question right before we started, how am I doing? How am I feeling in the moment? And I think being open as a and I'd love for you to contribute, but this is what I'm hearing. Being open as a leader, being able to read the other orientation within your team is extremely important and is the key to even understanding both engagement, but also say the innovation mindset and the culture that is thriving within the team.
Absolutely, I think that's well said. I, in my opinion, I think it's so important to have um, leaders in organizations who are willing to admit that they don't have all the answers, b, are willing to create a lot of that white space that allows their people to step in where it makes sense
Yeah.
for them, um, and c, it's also like a recognition of how people want to step in. I mean, not like in Aishani, you and I talk about this all the time. Being innovative is going to mean very different things to you, to me, to other people
Hmm.
on our team, to the clients we work with, to people in their particular organizations as well. And so it's not just always thinking that innovation means we all get into a room and we throw up a bunch of stickies and we're saying, how are we
Yeah.
going to redefine the processes that we have? But it's how do you actually become attuned to the individuals that you're working with and start to think about innovative from their lenses. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to me. It's the same things that are true in innovation are the same things that are true in many other skill sets that you need to have in today's world. And it all kind of gets rooted in your own awareness of yourself and how you show up, but then the others around you and how do you reorient accordingly.
That's fantastic. So it's almost like empathy is at the core of all of this. Building and practicing that empathy. I think it's empathy in action at the end of the day as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
as you know, I know you work across the board with a lot of leaders from different industries, L&D leaders, and also like strategy leaders. What are some of the things you're seeing leaders do to create this space for innovation and dialogue? What are some of the things they're doing well?
Mm, mm. So some of the things we've talked about, I think there's an awareness and an understanding that, particularly as we look at the macroeconomic environment, global uncertainty, people are becoming a little bit more okay with not having full reign on what is next. And I
Hmm.
think they're sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of really strong awareness, they're going to their people and saying, "Hey, we don't have all the answers, and we want you to be included because this is going to be a moment for us to get through together, and we'll come out stronger if we can do that." So I think there is this awareness and vulnerability that can be built into organizations that allows people to feel okay that not everything is figured out. I have a little saying, and Ashani, if you know anything about me at this point, I love analogies. Um, I think in times like this, a lot of organizations and a lot of leadership teams are trying to put fences around hurricanes, and
Hmm.
in the absence of having that certainty, they want to put some structure, some control, some direction. And I think there's just a difference between trying to fence in uncertainty and trying to give yourself a couple of anchor points.
Hmm.
And the anchor points are creating a nice foundation of culture that creates leadership opportunities for people to feel like it's okay to not have all the answers and it's okay to find expertise, and it's okay to find innovation elsewhere. And also just the awareness that when things aren't going well, we can have very pragmatic and candid conversations. So if I were to sum it up, I think organizations who are buying into this concept that uncertainty means uncertainty, and that it doesn't necessarily mean we have to come back to the table having everything figured out for our people. There's a lot of power in that, and there's a lot of humanity in that approach. And you mentioned it. It's kind of starting with the
Yeah.
core of empathy. It's just as true as how organizations are living, breathing things, just like the
Yep.
individuals that make them up. And if your organization doesn't approach its people with an empathetic approach, how do you expect empathy to become part of your culture?
That's a great point. And Grift, going back to your point, if instead of putting fences around hurricanes, it's more important to kind of anchor and go back to kind of build that foundation, that core foundation that would encourage this environment. If you got a little tactical, what are some of the specific ways you think leaders can do this,
Mm,
especially in this time
great
of
question.
uncertainty?
Great question. Yeah,
Mm.
I think so. I think maybe looking at a few different altitudes, I would say for organizations, it's really important to kind of get clear again around what are those core things we care most about. Now, some
Yeah.
organizations might call those core values. Some organizations might call those operating principles. Um, there might be other terms that you might call, but I think at a baseline, an organization is getting really, really clear on the core things that as we go through this, these are the things that are prioritized above everything else. We do not sacrifice these things in the vein of
Hmm.
other things. So I think that steadfastness of giving yourself that core allows you to be kind of whipped around in the storm, but you'll never kind of lose sight of where we're all headed as an organization. I think the second layer is recognizing that in times like this, great leaders with all the best intentions potentially have a amount of terrible volume impact, what we might call the frozen middle. Um, you have first line leaders and maybe mid-level leaders who are trying to hunker down and they're trying to protect their teams from some of this uncertainty. And so they face downward and they almost just umbrella their team to say, we're going to get through this. I'm not necessarily going to worry about all the things that are coming down from the top because I really care about my team. And when that happens, what you start to see is some of that direction we're trying to set or some of that core values that we're trying to reignite potentially can get stopped or thawed or frozen in this frozen middle. And so for organizations to get through this, you really need to engage that mid-level line of lead, get them excited and get them really thinking about the future and feeling like they have agency in the future direction of the organization as well. And I think the third piece is how are you continuing to give people experiences, awareness around the importance of growth mindset. As we talk about as an organization, we don't change anyone's behavior.
Yeah.
We just create the environment and the experiences that allow people to step into their own behavior change. But behavior change starts with a mindset change, and how much are you giving people the chance to really buy into their own growth mindset? Because that's really the only way that they're going to have their own anchor, their own foundation when times get really tough.
Well, Grift, I think this whole conversation was full of so many nuggets that I almost wish I had a paper and pen on me to take notes. But I'm just glad this is recorded and I can go back to it, anytime. So as we run this conversation out, and as like one last sort of parting sort of summary or thought, as leaders create the space for their teams for innovation to thrive specifically, what are some specific behaviors they should encourage, look out for, and other tools that they should leverage in order to encourage these behaviors and mindsets?
Yeah. So
Loaded
my answer,
question.
it is, but
Yeah.
I think it's the right question, and I'll give you maybe my first part of this response will be um, another thing that I probably am on record saying a lot. A lot of the stuff is not going to be rocket science.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff is around how often and how aware are you as a leader of your team, and I mean leader from the sense of every single person in your organization, but it all has to start with an awareness of yourself and it has to start with an awareness of the people around you. Without that, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to have the
Yeah.
chance to really dive into that diversity that's going to get us to the best potential solutions for problems both large and small. So I think piece of it is an awareness. Second piece of it is not related to innovation at all, feedback culture. How often are people across your organization willing to give feedback to one another, both the things that are going really well, as well as some of the things that can be
Yeah.
improved? Feedback culture, when it relates to innovation, is so critical because if you don't have the safety, if you don't have the trust to put half-baked ideas in front of people you work with, then you're just going to be waiting to put polish on something, but maybe you're polishing something that is never going to see the light of day, and you're really you're disenchanting the process because you're not
Yeah.
getting the chance to get some really good idea flow into the system that could really make your idea go from good to potentially great or extraordinary. The last piece of it, which I think is maybe a good prelude to where this conversation could go, is getting some kind of fun and tactical with some innovation style tools that allow
Mhm.
your people to get closer to what an innovation or design thinking process might look like. So if we have that right mindset, do we build empathy maps for the people we solve problems for? Do we define problem statements that get us below maybe what's above the surface and they think this is the need, but our root cause gets us to a deeper understanding? Are we having the chance to have conversations that don't have necessarily just an endpoint, but they are more open source? We can maybe engage some of our teammates who are a bit more akin to open style brainstorming and innovation ideation sessions. So I think there are a couple of those tools, and I'm assuming maybe there'll be some more talked about in that lens. But I hate to kind of be a broken record, but I think a lot of it comes back to some of these core fundamental ways that we can be more aware of one another, and
Yes.
then use that to build a feedback culture around trust and safety. That's going to get us to be able to do all this other stuff that we want to do.
That's extremely powerful. And I know personally, listening, practicing empathy and feedback is something I personally try to practice a lot. And I'm very glad because Thoughtium encourages it and fosters that spirit as well, both of feedback and of listening. That was a very, should I say, like a very, not a broken record, because that was a very powerful, I think, toolkit that you just kind of you gave away as a griftism, if I may. And to round this out, we have our, as usual, a quick rapid fire for you, Grift.
Mm.
Some of these questions that you have not heard before, and I know you love these. So, what was the last time you did something creative, and what was it? Sip and
Mm.
dabble paint nights would count.
Let's see. Oof. The last time I did something creative. Well, now you're making me think about the definition I laid out because I was trying to say
Yes.
creativity is both large and small, right? So maybe I'll give a little bit of an example of both. The last time that I did something maybe we'll call it micro creative was I just got into a room with a few of my teammates and we were talking about maybe doing some slightly different ways of initial conversations with prospecting clients that really got me excited for how might we approach conversations with people in our networks who are interested about what we do by giving them value as opposed to about giving them just insights. So I thought that was a really interesting and creative moment where I was able to impart a little bit of my own agency into that conversation. So micro creativity, macro creativity. I tried to paint something last week and it was just terrible. It was awful. But look, I'm sure at some point Van Gogh painted something and he said that was awful too. So maybe I'm just being a really harsh critic on myself. But maybe it was just terrible too. I'm not, I can't really tell.
Agenda item for our next team call is to see Grift's painting. We shall be the
I knew
judges.
that's why I was hesitant. I didn't want to bring it up. So I guess we'll see. We can report back.
Totally. Next question. What's a recent innovation that completely blew your mind?
Oh, oof, that's a really good question. An innovation that blew my mind. Oh man. Shawnee, you hit me with the really good ones here. Well, can I ask you the same question while I formulate mine? Because I feel like you might have some good ones by putting that question together.
I was not expecting this. So we both can think of our responses, I think, at this point. Um, my God. You know what it was? Actually, um, this is just my mediocre tech skills, but like Anthony shared with me the MagSafe that can actually make your iPhone like a 4K HD camera for your laptop. You're just going to put it
Mm.
behind the screen. I was mind blown with that. That was the recent one.
Oh man, you gave me all that time, and I'm still really struggling to. Oh, okay, I'm gonna go not recent, but something that has really mind
Yeah.
blown my mind in terms of how it's changed around my productivity. Apps like Calendly. I'll give a
Mm.
personal shout out to Calendly. I think there was this mindset that existed around sort of the power struggle of who has to give who times for
Yeah.
meetings. And what I think Calendly and applications like that have done is they've democratized the setup of conversations. And I think, if you're a Cal Newport fan and you've read his second book, talking about just the amount of time that we send emails back and forth to one another,
Yeah.
trying to find space on each other's calendars, that has blown my mind that Calendly and companies like that have focused on this particular challenge and have done an amazing amount of democratization in getting on each other's calendar.
That's true, actually. I do love Calendly. I use a lot of Calendly myself. So great answer, Grift. For all the time you took, I'll give this one to you. And
Appreciate it.
last one. Think about something you admire about yourself and fill in the blank. If the world were more like me, it would be more.
Curious.
Absolutely. I think that's a word I very strongly associate with you. Well,
But
thank you
for both
so
the
much
better
for
and
being.
the worst, it sounds like.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here and joining me on the second perspective series today. It was delightful speaking with you, and I'm sure we kind of everyone's walking away with just tons and tons of insights that I'm actually going to go back, sit down with a Word doc, and make notes based on this. Thank you so much for being with us,
Yeah.
Grift.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate where we're going with these conversations. And Ashani, thanks for being such a wonderful host and for giving me a couple of hard balls and softballs on questions. I hope
That's
I
sweet.
lived up to the snuff.
You did. You did. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And thank you for everyone who tuned in today. We hope this was insightful. As a reminder, we are hosting this month's Perspective series, which is a three-part series. This was episode 2 of the Perspective series. Our first conversation was with Anthony Ewing, the CEO at Thoughtium. Today, we spoke with Grift, who is our vice president at Thoughtium, and we spoke about some ways leaders can create the space for innovation for their teams and bring everyone on the team to the table. In our next episode, we round this out with Michael Nordstorm, a director of Thoughtium, one of my favorite people again, and we will deconstruct or demystify the toolkit that you can take to your teams and make this a reality, make this culture of innovation a reality at your workplace. Tune in next week on Thursday at 3 p.m. Central, and you can access a perspective series and the toolkit at thoughtium.com/perspectives. Thank you and have a wonderful day.